Hello again. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. I'm Bob Continetti, Senior Associate Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, and I'll be your moderator for today's Faculty and Research Town Hall. Once again, we have a group of panelists gathered to provide updates on the evolution of our operations during the continuing COVID-19 pandemic and to answer your questions. Some questions were submitted during registration. But also, please feel free to use the Q&A window to submit additional questions for our panelists today. Due to our time limitations, we will not be able to get to all of your questions, but we will log the questions as they come in and post answers on the Return to Learn website with the link pasted into the chat. Today's webinar has live closed captioning available in two ways. First, you can click on the closed caption button at the bottom of the screen and select Show Subtitles, or you can also click on the link that is now being pasted into the chat. With that, I would like to introduce our Chancellor, Pradeep Khosla, for some welcoming remarks. Chancellor Khosla.
Thank you, Bob. Good afternoon and welcome everybody. We are a few weeks away from the start of the fall quarter and our campus is ready. I also know many of you are ready. I'm looking forward to seeing more faculty and more students return to campus. We are carefully monitoring the Delta variant. We continue to, we continue to update campus safety protocols in response to this dynamic situation. And we are confident that our flexible return to learn strategy will continue to perform well. We have added the UC vaccine mandate to our strategy. Full compliance, as you know, is required by September 6th. If you're already fully vaccinated, thank you so very much. And if you're not, then I urge you to do so ASAP. It is free, it is easy to schedule, and it is quick. Vaccination is our #1 defense against serious illness. Masking is our #1 defense against transmission. And everyone, regardless of vaccine status, must wear a mask indoors at all UC San Diego locations. Exceptions are when eating and drinking and when alone in a closed office. Masks are not required, but are strongly encouraged. Daily symptom screening is helping us track viral activity, and everyone coming to campus must continue to complete the daily symptom screener. Also helping us track viral activity is asymptomatic testing. Students will be required to test prior to move-in, and they will also test on day 5 and day 10 after move-in. Students will then test weekly thereafter. Weekly asymptomatic testing for faculty and staff is recommended, but not required. And wastewater monitoring will continue throughout the campus. Those living and working in buildings that receive a positive wastewater signal will be required to test within 24 hours. We have made the decision to postpone all indoor events or shift them to a virtual format through the end of October. Masks may be required at outdoor events at the discretion of event organizers, and we will continue to assess and adapt our campus safety protocols based on data and the evolving science. We will also continue to be successful because of you, our staff, and our students. So thank you very much for your continued commitment to safety and to supporting our campus. Bob, I'll turn this back over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chancellor Khosla. I would now like to welcome our co-host of today's town hall, Executive Vice Chancellor Elizabeth Simmons.
Thanks very much, Bob. It's a real pleasure to host this Faculty and Research Town Hall with Vice Chancellor for Research, Sandra Brown. We'll be reviewing the latest developments in campus operations, especially those that impact teaching and research and the whole academic mission, and return to learn plans in general for the upcoming fall quarter. We'll try to focus as carefully as possible on the issues that are most on your minds right now. Things like how implementation of the vaccine mandate is going to work, what it's going to mean for you as researchers and as educators. And let me echo the Chancellor in thanking you all for everything that you have been doing day in and day out to keep the academic mission moving forward, to support students, to support the development of more junior researchers, and generally keep us strong as a university and an academic powerhouse. So there are going to be several presentations, so I will stop my remarks here and just say, we will answer as many of your questions as it is physically possible to during the town hall, and we will of course post answers to the rest on the Return to Learn website. So please visit returntolearn.ucsd.edu frequently. Back to you, Bob.
Thank you, EVC Simmons. I would now like to introduce our first presenter today, Dr. Chip Schooley, Professor of Medicine, to update us on the state of the pandemic.
Thanks very much, Dr. Continetti. I'm going to spend a few minutes just setting the stage for the rest of the afternoon, giving us a sense of where things are and where they're likely to be going as we move into the coming quarter. The U.S. continues to have a surge that you've been observing on almost every breathless news report since the end of June that has been rising. Next slide. Primarily in the states where vaccination penetration has been lowest, in other words, in the southeastern United States. We in California have been seeing a rise as well. Most of this is driven by the unvaccinated population. Next slide. In San Diego, this shows you the public health measures that have been put in place over the course of the pandemic and how the case rate has responded to each of these. We were in a very quiet phase early in the late spring and early summer when, next slide, Delta arrived. And with the arrival of the Delta variant, we and many other parts of the country began to see a rise in cases among our population. That has continued to rise over the course of the last 6 weeks. If you look carefully, though, you can see that the rate of rise has declined, and we may be beginning to see that we're beginning to approach the crest of the curve, which I think is very good news. Next slide. Additional good news is that the Pfizer vaccine, COVID vaccine, was fully approved by the FDA yesterday. This provides full operating approval for physicians to use the vaccine in people who have not been vaccinated, but also opens the door for booster vaccinations for the immunocompromised and for other people who are in high-risk frontline situations. Next slide. Now, what we've been seeing over the course of the pandemic is that as more and more people are vaccinated, the disease has been concentrated in the unvaccinated population. If you look at the situation in San Diego, what you can see is that in which the vaccinated population, at least one dose of vaccine, is about 84% of the population. You can see that the number of cases is much higher in the unvaccinated population, about 9 times higher than in the vaccinated population. Next slide. And that from the standpoint of those who are hospitalized, the difference is even starker. People are 36 times more likely to be hospitalized if they haven't been vaccinated than if they have. So while the vaccines are highly effective at preventing morbidity and mortality, they're less effective in preventing shedding of virus, and we'll get to this in just a minute. But from the standpoint of keeping people out of the hospital, the vaccines have done a tremendous job of that. 95% of the hospitalizations in California have been in the unvaccinated population. Next slide. So how is UC San Diego doing in terms of vaccination rates? We're doing even better than San Diego. You can see that the health science employees, 90% of them have received at least one vaccination. They're on their way. On campus, about 86%. And the current data we have on students is about 70%, but we think this is incomplete because many of the students haven't yet arrived and uploaded their vaccination information. But from the standpoint of vaccine penetration, the UC San Diego community is doing extremely well. Next slide. And what we're seeing in this slide, which depicts the breakthrough infections, the infections in the vaccinated and unvaccinated people on these are the health data, but the campus data are similar. You can see that in red, what we were seeing early on were cases in the not vaccinated population in the middle part of the summer. As the Delta wave arrived, we began to see more and more cases in green among the fully vaccinated population. These cases are primarily either without symptoms or with mild symptoms. These tend to be with more severe symptoms. And this increasing amount of infection in the fully vaccinated population is what's moving discussions that you've been hearing the last couple of weeks about booster shots, which are likely to be, which are being recommended over the course of the fall. I'll stop there and turn this back to Dr. Continetti, and then we'll hear more about the vaccine mandate itself and how we'll operate it.
Thank you, Dr. Schooley. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Allison Satterland, Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, and Dr. Angela Shosha, Interim Executive Director of Student Health and Wellbeing and Chair of the Vaccination Mandate Work Group. They'll discuss the implementation of the vaccine mandate and how move-in will proceed for the fall quarter.
Good afternoon, everyone. So the mandate goes into effect on September 6th, 2 weeks before the start of the fall quarter. There are basically two ways to be in compliance. Be fully vaccinated, which means you have to have completed your vaccine series and then have an additional 2 weeks. That's when you reach full vaccination. Or you need an approved exception or deferral. Please submit these as soon as possible so that we can track your compliance. If you get them in by September the 2nd, we'll be able to record it and you will meet the mandate. That doesn't mean you'll have your answer to exception being approved or not, but you'll at least met the mandate to submit a request. And there are basically 4 categories of exception or deferral. Medical exemption, which may be temporary permanent, disability, temporary permanent, religious, as well as a deferral for pregnancy. Although it's been very clear the science is supporting vaccination in pregnancy, and we are encouraging our pregnant individuals or those planning to become pregnant to vaccinate. Next slide. Those individuals who are granted exceptions or deferrals will need to follow the non-pharmaceutical interventions. This also includes individuals who are partially vaccinated. We have many of our international students in that category, or they have not been able to access vaccine, and we are tracking those. Individuals in this space, they've not achieved full vaccination, need to follow the non-pharmaceutical interventions, which are defined by each of the campus, and these will evolve as the year goes through. Masking is part of this, as well as surveillance testing, which will be for the asymptomatic, unvaccinated individuals. We'll do COVID testing twice a week, and I'll speak more to that as we go along. So these non-pharmaceutical interventions are a requirement for those granted the exception and deferral. Next slide. So how do you get your vaccine status documented? You're someone who is fully vaccinated. We're using your health record, which is in the Epic My Chart. This will be ability to demonstrate compliance with the mandate. The details of your clinical information will not be used, just that you have achieved full vaccination. And the IT teams on both the campus and the health system have worked this out very carefully to ensure privacy, but also be able to ensure easy compliance with the mandate. If you've been vaccinated at UC San Diego Health, which includes Petco, REMAC, the Price Center, or the various health system clinics, you will have it documented in your MAR chart, and you should have actually seen a message. All you have to do is give consent to share the information. Once you're done, you are fully compliant with the mandate. If you only got 1 dose with UC San Diego Health, or you get both of your doses or your single J&J dose somewhere else, you can add the information to your My Chart. You then give the same consent and everything will be fine. And you'll be compliant with the mandate. There are some providers in California and San Diego that participate in the immunization registry. So your information already will be there. So please take a look at your My Chart. If you haven't done so already, respond to any My Chart message and just give your consent and you're complying with the mandate. We are accepting internationally WHO approved vaccination, which is really important for our international community. Lots of details on this on the Return to Learn site. We're finding most people have found the process very easy. Next slide. Okay, for medical and disability exemptions, you do need a certification by a healthcare provider. So it's not only your request, but also this certification by a healthcare provider must accompany the request. Sometimes these are temporary exemptions, such as an individual who had a recent COVID-19 infection is going to delay their vaccination for a while, or you may have a permanent contraindication of vaccination. We're finding very few individuals actually are asking for the exemptions, and most individuals are complying with the mandate by vaccination. Next slide. Just to remind folks, for the employee process, we are using a third-party administrator called Sedgwick. And so the employee completes a request on Qualtrics. That goes to the third-party administrator who basically works with the employee for all the information. The third-party administrator can issue an approval, but not a denial. They will issue a non-approval, and then there will be local campus review that is done for medical and the pregnancy deferrals by COEM, occupational health, by disability, by HR. And then there is a very detailed religious exemption process, which is a multidisciplinary campus committee, which also has a layer of a UCOP advisory committee for religious exemptions. Things seem to be moving very smoothly, both for the employee process, and we have created a parallel process for our students. And they are, actually, we've had relatively few students requesting exemptions at this point. We're hoping everybody who needs one is getting that request in any time. But right now, things are looking very positive. Next slide. Okay, I wanted to review the masking and testing recommendations briefly. So masking is pretty much regardless of vaccination status. It's required in all indoor spaces, with the exception, as the Chancellor mentioned, if you are alone in your personal office and it is an enclosed office. We are not encouraging eating in indoor spaces unless you are alone. So if you have meetings with your team indoors, there should be no eating and you should be masked. For the students living on campus, they will start out in phase 1, which requires them, if they are living with other individuals and not part of their household, so for graduates living with other graduates who are not family members, or all of our undergraduate community, they will be in phase 1 where they are masking in the common areas, but they are not masking in their personal bedroom or the shower. For testing, this is a residential move-in. All of our students, regardless of vaccination, who are living on campus, are testing on the day of arrival, day 5, and day 10. They will then move into the ongoing fall quarter plans. For the fall quarter, everyone, employees and students, regardless of vaccination, should be doing the daily symptom screening and testing for symptoms. If you are a resident of a campus building and you live on campus and there is a wastewater signal in your building, regardless of vaccination, you should test. This will be one of our earliest and best signals that someone is shedding virus. They've acquired an infection on campus. The unvaccinated student population, as well as the unvaccinated employee and staff faculty populations will need to test twice weekly. That testing should be no more than 3 days, no less than 3 days, no more than 3 days apart, or no less than 5 days apart. So twice a week, unvaccinated surveillance testing will be in place. This is how we'll start the fall quarter. We'll make adjustments as things go along. Next slide. I think I'm handing over to Allison.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sosha. So I just wanted to get us started with the definition of an event. This is something that comes up regularly. It's not perfect, but we're not in perfect times. So according to our campus policy, an event is any planned gathering taking place at a UC San Diego location, including but not limited to celebrations, dances, lectures, forums, performances, social gatherings, concerts, speaker presentations, conferences, or athletic contests or tournaments where 25 or more people are in attendance or are reasonably anticipated to be in attendance. So please note that an event, again, per our campus policy, does not include academic classes or seminars, department meetings, business meetings, laboratory meetings. So I ask that you keep this definition in mind as I briefly overview some of our recent campus events guidance that'll take us through the end of October. So one thing that we have done, we hope it will serve to simplify this process and provide guidance around the unique events, particularly those that we're recommending take place outdoors. That we ask you to use our campus events and activities portal page. It will really walk you through the guidance that you'll need. It'll also take you to, again, a portal where the EOC, again, our Emergency Operations Committee will have an opportunity to review your proposal for safety, ultimately making its way to your Vice Chancellor or your Executive Vice Chancellor for final approval of an outdoor event, or on a very rare exception, an indoor event. Again, it would have to have the approval at the Vice Chancellor level or within the Academic Affairs unit, the Executive Vice Chancellor. The process is quite easy. We've actually been using it for some time and continuing to work out the kinks. And there's a wonderful team that's providing support to this process. So if you have any questions, happy to take them at vcsa@ucsd.edu. You'll also find support information in that events and activities intake form. So just quickly to sort of expedite the approval process, we're encouraging all our creative and event planners and collaborators to ask their level 1 approvers to look for an email from this email address here that's identified on the slide, and a subject line that will call out your approval is required, specific to an event initiation or registration. I'm going to take you to the next slide, and you'll see a grid that provides guidance on the specific approvals required for the type of event associated with the specific host. So you'll see a UC San Diego department. You're going to want to first work with your host department head. Eventually, it will make its way to the divisional vice chancellor associated with your unit. A college student organization will work closely first with the college dean of student affairs, and it will eventually make its way to my office, to me. All of our student organizations that are registered with our student life unit will first be reviewed, and if approved by a CSI advisor, will then make its way also to me. We do have student organizations, graduate and undergraduate organizations that are not registered with student life. So the first approver will be the department chair, and they will make their way ultimately to the executive vice chancellor's office. And again, that applies to our undergraduate student organizations as well as our graduate student organizations. We don't have many, but there are some specific organizations that are supported by students and student leaders and departments that are not officially by our student life unit. So we've modified our intake process to reflect that. Next slide. So again, I just want to thank everybody for their continued flexibility. The intake form will be most helpful, and we'll make our way through this continued change. I'd now like to introduce my colleague, Dr. Jensen. Or I'm sorry, I have to take it back to Bob, who's going to introduce my colleague, Dr. Jensen.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Satterland and Dr. Shosha. Next, we're going to hear about fall instruction from Dr. Carlos Jensen, Associate Vice Chancellor for Educational Innovation, and Dulce Dorado, Director of International Students and Programs, Office of Global Education.
All right, thank you, Dr. Continetti. So as Dr. Sosha and others have explained, we are going to operate in an environment where we have a vaccine mandate for all, where we're going to continue to do wastewater monitoring, testing requirements, all of our usual safety protocols. What's new for fall is that the occupancy restrictions have been removed. There's no longer a cap on 25% occupancy. Indoor masking requirements are different for classes than they are for events, just to emphasize that. Indoor masking will be required for all classes, both for students as well as faculty. Outdoor masking will be required for almost all classes. We are leaving open the possibility of accommodating small numbers of low density outdoor classes that need to operate maskless as an accommodation. And this is either because of ADA requirements or because of the nature of the instruction. Those will continue to operate at 25% capacity and low density, and will be safe. Health ambassadors and student affairs will be ready to assist with enforcement of the rules. In the classroom, there will be instructions for how to get in touch or how to report any instances of non-compliance. I'll just emphasize that over the past year, we have run in-person classes, and compliance has been remarkably high. Our students are very diligent about following the rules and keeping everyone safe. As of right now, about 88% of our undergraduate classes are scheduled for in-person delivery. We started off with a lower number, but there was a call to increase the number of online courses to be able to accommodate students who needed an accommodation, either because of travel restrictions or because of health issues. And I want to thank all of you for kind of rising to that challenge and helping out our students. Next slide. In addition to our indoor spaces, we have our 6 outdoor, fully equipped outdoor classrooms. We've talked about those all throughout the past year. For those who are engaging in teaching that requires a lot of vigorous talking or exercise, they're a good option. The air circulation through there is about 10 times what we can accommodate in an indoor setting. And as we all know at this point, the accumulation of particles in the air is what causes or brings the risk of contagion. So those rooms will become available for scheduling shortly. And we will prioritize first the classes that have a need for that kind of instructional setting. And then second priority will be given to folks who just want to use the outdoor classrooms instead of indoor classrooms. In addition to that, we have 110 indoor classrooms. 70% of those have been brought up to be fully Zoom capable. Most of the remaining are small seminar rooms, and we will continue to work on those throughout the term. Because we're going to be teaching masked, there have been a number of concerns about voice quality and understandability. We are working with ITS to create some demonstration videos of what it sounds like in the back of a classroom when you're lecturing with a mask. But we understand that in many cases, amplification will be desired or required. And so in most of the small spaces, the ones that are Zoom capable, there's either a podium mic or a ceiling mic. And there will be instructions on the podium about how to use those microphones to amplify the sound, even if you're not engaging in a Zoom lecture. And in the larger spaces, or 30 larger classrooms, we use little lapel microphones. And if you're lecturing in one of those classes, you can request your free personal lapel microphone to use throughout the term and beyond for added safety. The email address for how to request one was in these slides. And in addition to that, Educational Technology Services are working very hard to update their tips and best practices for how to teach successfully with the new technology. In the past year, since most of you have been in the classroom, we've worked really, really hard to upgrade and to improve the teaching and learning experience. And so when you come back to the classroom, you'll see a number of important upgrades. So with that, I will turn it over to Director Dorado to speak a little bit about the international student situation.
Thank you, AVC Jensen. So today I'll provide some visa and travel updates that may impact our international students. Although there are still COVID-related travel restrictions that are still in place for individuals traveling to the United States, the National Interest Exception, or what's called NIE, continues to extend eligibility for international students to travel to the United States. Students with expired visas, though, will still need to apply for a visa first before traveling to the United States. Next slide, please. ISPO continues to hear concerns from students about long appointment wait times and visa processing times. You may have heard these same concerns from students. What this slide shows you is the latest information for some of the consular posts from around the world. We are seeing some mixed results, especially from China and India, which are the largest countries of origin for our international students. So what you'll see here, the average visa appointment wait times right now are anywhere from 2 to 3 days in China, but of course in India, visas are still by emergency appointment only. Next slide, please. ISPO is also monitoring the visa issuance rates at the major embassies and consulates from around the world. What this chart shows you is a comparison between 2019, so pre-COVID, 2020, and then 2021. We're also seeing some mixed results here. Of course, positive trends such as more visas being issued, especially in Beijing, Shanghai, Calcutta, and Seoul in comparison to pre-COVID times. But you'll also see lower visa issuance rates in other posts. Next slide, please. ISPO does continue to receive strong interest from our international students to arrive in fall of 2021, but because of the possible visa and travel issues, some students may still be unable to arrive here at UC San Diego in the fall, or some may be delayed in their arrival. So academic departments may need to consider continued flexibility and accommodations for these students for this upcoming fall term. ISPO does continue to provide support letters for visa applications. And then we're also informing students that they can arrive up until the end of week 2, which is October 8th. Next slide, please. We do continue to monitor the visa and travel issues that may be impacting our students. ISPO will continue to send out updates not only to our students directly, but to faculty and staff through our newsletters. If students have any visa travel questions, please refer them to the International Students and Programs Office. Our website is icestudents.ucsd.edu, or our email address is icestudents@ucsd.edu. So thank you, and back to Dr. Continetti.
Thank you, ABC Jensen and Director Dorado. Now we're going to hear about campus and classroom safety updates from Vice Chancellor for Resource Management and Planning, Gary Matthews.
Good afternoon, all, and thank you, Dr. Continetti. I'd also like to thank those of you on the webinar for all of your patience and support throughout the COVID crisis. Some of the things that have been done, you may have heard already, but I really do want to repeat. We've placed hand sanitizers throughout the campus, and we're going to continue to provide those supplies. And yes, much of what has been focused on recently is the aerosol effect, but we're still doing a lot of the sanitizing and cleaning just to be certain. We're using electrostatic sprayers and other equipment to allow for 100% of the surfaces to be done as needed. And 95% of the campus's buildings have now been retrofitted to MERV 14 air filters, which are similar to hospital grade. And the other 2 or 3 buildings will be completed before fall opening. Others will be addressed, and many of the remaining 5% of the buildings have operable windows. And facilities management has been working closely with building occupants to assess those areas, determine how best to increase airflow. Next slide, please. Working with the EOC, Emergency Operations Center, facilities management is also available to answer questions. So over the last several weeks, many of the department MSOs and other leaders have provided questions to either facilities management, EOC, or myself regarding the operations. I focused just a few minutes ago on the HVAC and air handling, which is important. So part of what's also been going on since the start of the pandemic is that we're operating all of the air filters or the air systems at 100% maximum capacity, 24 hours, 7 days a week. It was felt that we wanted to make sure that we had maximum airflow throughout those systems. Besides that, we're going above and beyond what the CDC has asked for in terms of managing and cleaning our systems, the HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, cleaning air intakes, catch valves, and the air handling rooms, and as well as disinfecting. We're also making sure that the building systems are operable. I mean, our buildings were never designed to be closed or shuttered for as long as they have. So plumbing systems have been maintained, disinfected in some areas, and standing water has certainly been addressed, and many areas have been disinfected quite sufficiently over the last several months. Next slide, please. So part of what we're talking to folks about also is our staff, the custodians, groundskeepers, first responders, whether they're in the police department, CSOs, and our utilities management group have been here throughout the pandemic. And one thing that we're asking folks to do is to practice good hygiene, their own good hygiene, self-clean and sanitize your space. So an office as an example. They will be cleaned, but after you use it, particularly if you're sharing it, if you could wipe it down, that would be more than appropriate. And we will be providing, along with procurement, one-time supplies of cleaning and disinfecting equipment for departments. And we will also be assessing opportunities for the distribution of a limited number of masks to ensure that they're available should someone not appear in a class or in a building without one. I believe that's my last slide. There may be one more. Next slide. So back to you, Dr. Continetti.
All right. Thank you, Vice Chancellor Matthews, for that update. Now we will hear from Vice Chancellor for Research, Sandra Brown, for some research updates.
Thank you, Dr. Continetti, and welcome everyone. Pleased to be able to join, albeit a little late today. And I think I have nothing but good news to share today. Our ongoing campus activity amounts to over 9,000 people on campus with research ramp-up plans, and then additional students, volunteers, and visitors in labs. These are really diverse teams on campus, as you can see in this pie-shaped chart. About a fifth of them are faculty, 12% postdoctoral scholars, a quarter are staff, about a quarter are graduate students, and 18% undergrads that are listed on the research ramp-up plans already. So already we have quite a diverse group of people who are on campus and engaged in activities. This year, this past year, we were ranked 6th in the nation in terms of the research that you all produced. It was at 1.54 billion when we include the contracts, the grants, and gifts for research. This is about 6% increase over the last fiscal year. It's the largest ever and the 12th year that we've been over $1 billion of research resources to conduct the activities that we do on campus. We have some new resources in the VCR's office to help with large scale applications and training program applications. This includes some folks that can help with graphics, actual writing and administrative coordination for those large projects. And it's the Research and Development Office that provides this opportunity. And our Quali IRB is up and operational since July. And I think we'll have Kip Cantello and perhaps others on the phone later to answer any questions that might unfold that might have unfolded with regard to that. Next slide, please. We adhere to, we have changed the requirements for conducting research on campus. The research ramp-up plans, as you update people in your lab, please update your plans. Don't have to submit a whole new plan, just do the additions through the research ramp-up process. Everybody who's in a research lab or a research setting needs to do their daily symptom screening, wear face coverings indoors all the time, just except if you're in your office alone, and to follow the campus vaccination policy. I do want to say that we're moving toward a cybersecurity certification for research. I encourage everybody to get involved with that. I think we already have over 100 labs that have completed the certification process. This just gets you into using best practices and is an advantage when you're submitting your grants. So we want to have that cybersecurity certification in research labs. People have asked, can we have indoor meetings if they're research related? And of course you can. All the attendees would have to be masked, just like in any other setting. We don't allow food or drinks. The meetings can include those that need to be there, and it's always important to provide a remote option for those who will not be on site. Remember that if you have larger meetings, that there is a formal approval process, and I know that's already been discussed. So for more information on that, there's the COVID event planning and attendance process. So Folks have also asked, can students continue to be involved in labs, and can they continue to do rotations in laboratories as part of their graduate training or their undergraduate training? And of course, the answer is yes. They do need to follow the protocols. We do expect everyone to adhere to the same safety protocols that the faculty and other staff adhere to. Next slide, please. Finally, I wanted to remind people that the new QALY grant application and contract application process has some deadlines that are important to attend to. Anyone who's submitting a contract or grant should submit that to their unit, the department administrative unit, the divisional administrative unit, your center administrative unit, whichever one it is, to begin the administrative process. And that should be done at least 14 days in advance. At least 5 days in advance, the principal investigator and the department chair of the unit need to have the administrative requirements completed. Now, just as a reminder, across all of the sponsored project officers, these agreements for what the PI will complete and what the department chair unit head will complete have been agreed on and committed to. And then 2 days or a day before the application is due, you need to get that into your sponsored projects office. It needs to get to OCGA. That's really important because we don't get to that $1.54 billion mark without a huge number of additional grant applications. And we are starting to have some applications that, because they're late, if you're in that half of the applications that are late, there is a chance that there may be a complication and it doesn't get submitted for the deadline. We've had some of those cases. In one case, I think an application came in within a half an hour, and the site was so filled with other applications going in that the deadline was missed. Actually, I think that's happened in a couple of times now. And so I just want to remind people that if you adhere to this 14.5 and 2, that your administrators are going to be working with you on, that then we'll have time to catch any final glitches in the application, make sure everything is completed that we are administratively responsible for, and your grant can get off in a timely fashion. Last slide, please. I did just want to let you know that it looks like it's going to be a good year for research funding. The United States Innovation and Competition Act, that was formerly referred to as the Endless Frontier Act, you might have heard that, has been passed. There's $100 billion for new technology and innovation directorate for the NSF. The focus on this Innovation and Competition Act is in some areas of emerging technology where UCSD faculty have particular expertise and experience. Quantum science, artificial intelligence, robotics, synthetic biology, just to name a few. Now, to let people know, instead of a single bill that would cover all of the budget for the coming year, what is currently being done at the federal level is that there will be 12 appropriation bills, of which 9 have already been passed. And the ones that have been passed actually are very favorable to research. For example, $49 billion additional for the NIH, which is a good increase. There's an increase in, there's money to establish an ARPA-H, and ARPA Health also, and they're taking input on what might be the focus of ARPA-H. DOE has added additional funds as well. So there are others that are in the process, the $1 trillion for infrastructure and the $3.5 trillion budget resolution that are still in process. And you can see the things that are of particular interest in each of these, and they affect our campus. Number of the issues in the 3.5 trillion relate to higher education, things like Pell Grants, moving students' attention to HBCUs and MSIs, et cetera. A lot of workforce development funding and job training. There's money for climate research and research infrastructure. We'll be sending out information on that. Manufacturing, economic development, research in these areas as well. So I think it will be a good year in terms of opportunities for our faculty and our students who are applying for fellowships and individual awards. So with that, Dr. Continetti, I'll turn it back to you.
All right, thank you, Vice Chancellor Brown. Now it is time to move on to the question and answer segment of today's town hall. I invite all of our panelists to turn on their videos. During registration, attendees had an opportunity to submit questions for the panelists to answer. We have selected some of the most popular questions for the panel today. If you have a question now, and I know many of you have been doing this, please use the Q&A window to submit additional questions during the session, and our panelists will do their best to provide answers. Due to time limitations, we may not be able to get to all of your questions. However, we will do our best to post the answers in the FAQ at returntolearn.ucsd.edu. So the first question is for Dr. Schooley and Dr. Shosha. With the Delta variant circulating widely and infecting vaccinated people, what information has been used to make the decision to return to in-person classes at full capacity this fall? Thinking about the science and the modeling behind this decision.
Well, the Delta variant has been causing infections more frequently than the variants we were seeing before, but we're not seeing much morbidity in people who've been vaccinated. We anticipate that we're going to have a fall of more nuisance than we are of morbidity and mortality around UC San Diego because the vast majority of our community have been vaccinated. The plan to boost is something that, as you heard last week, was advanced by the Biden administration. I think is going to be a very important thing for us to see moving forward. Our analysis of the transmissions are that people are acquiring the virus off campus, in other words, not here at work, but rather in their daily activities around the home and shopping in other places, going out to dinner, but not here on campus. And we think the campus itself, this fall is going to be just as safe as it was last year, operating with people wearing masks and with all the surveillance we have in place. So we see the campus itself as being extremely safe, and we see the vaccines as being extremely effective and are anticipating that the fall will go quite well, especially for the vaccinated population.
Thank you, Dr. Schooley. Anything to add to that, Dr. Shosha?
No, I just say that we are preparing and figuring out how operation will be able to deliver those booster shots, because we know a lot of the community will want them, and we're going to make it accessible to folks as soon as we get the green light and we can start putting those processes in place. So we've got that in mind as another safety measure. And I think the importance of everybody paying attention to the wastewater signals, we've now made that requirement that residential students and individuals living in the residences on campus must test. Also pay attention to your building. If you see a signal in a building you've been in, you've used the facilities, please test regardless of vaccination status. So get in the habit of monitoring the buildings that you do research in or you teach in. If you see a signal, it could be a sign that you're accidentally shedding some virus. Get a test. All our vending machines will be fully operational and on campus starting September 1st. So some were closed down for a while. They'll be back up and running. So you'll be able to have easy access to testing. So please take advantage of it.
I want to add that everything we had in place last year is present this year. And in fact, we've intensified some of the tools we have to follow the epidemic. 6 of us meet every night to go over all the activity on the campus, all the activity in the community, and make decisions about any operational changes we need to make. So we're watching things extremely closely as we did last year. We're going to make adjustments if we need to. We've got a number of contingency plans in place if we need to make changes, and we're really quite optimistic about the fall going well.
Well, thank you, Dr. Schooley and Shosha. The next question is for EVC Simmons and Director Zumo from Academic Personnel Services. Will an in-person presence be required for faculty in the fall, and what accommodations will be granted?
Thanks very much for asking. So yes, the ordinary expectations for academics to have their work location be UC San Diego's campus will apply again in the fall. That's according to APM 025 that reminds us that faculty members must maintain a significant presence on campus, meet classes, keep office hours, etc. You can read the APM. So that is the expectation. Regarding accommodations, there are standard processes, and I think that Director Zumo can probably speak knowledgeably to that.
Thank you very much, UC Simmons. If an employee requires health and/or an ADA accommodation for their work, then they should follow the usual accommodation process, which includes the submission of appropriate documentation from their medical provider. The employee initiates this interactive process by reaching out to the Disability Counseling and Consulting Division of Human Resources.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that information. The next question is for Dr. Shosha. What is the rationale for the indoor masking requirement if all campus community members are required to be vaccinated?
Oh, thanks. I think this is something that we realized that the breakthrough infections do occur. So even though you're vaccinated, you may acquire an infection, particularly with Delta, which is more easily transmitted, and you could shed that virus even without having any symptoms. Therefore, knowing that most of our community will be vaccinated, some will inadvertently acquire an infection and could potentially infect others, we think a universal masking for indoor spaces in which viral particles can accumulate is the safest protocol to begin this fall.
Thank you, Dr. Shosha. The next question is for Vice Chancellor Brown. What are the current guidelines for safely conducting research? Do departments need to update their research ramp-up plans for the researchers, staff, and students in the various laboratories for the fall?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. The research requirements are the same in a research context as they are for other contexts. The faculty, staff, and students that are in those research settings need to adhere to all the standards for our university. If this is human subjects research, then those human subjects need to adhere to the campus standards as well. If you're in a clinical setting, you'll adhere to those that follow the health sciences requirements. So if you're in a clinical trial, that's how that would unfold. On general campus, the standards are the same as they are for other people in those same contexts. At present, we don't require vaccinations for participation in a project. An individual PI could require that. She or he would need to pay for that as a function of their research project. But everyone needs to wear masks. We need to maintain distancing as we can. And we need to have reports of symptoms for the 2 weeks before participation, as well as the day of participation. And then with regard to research ramp-up plans, please update your plans. That's a way for us to be sure to know who's in your lab. And if there's an issue or a problem, we know exactly who needs to be informed. This will be particularly important if, for example, there is a ramp down process, then we can know exactly who needs to be informed. We're hoping that that doesn't happen, of course. And we're thinking with all the safety precautions that we're taking, we're hoping that that would not unfold. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Brown. The next question is for AVC Jensen. What safeguards and guidelines will be in place for in-person classes in the fall quarter?
So to keep the classroom safe, we depend on the safety protocols that exist in campus. So the vaccine mandate is going to be a big one, but we've talked about the masking requirement both for indoor and outdoor classes. That's an added safety measure that isn't in place for all kinds of activities. In addition to that, these rules are going to be enforced through the student code of conduct. And so there's already been questions about how student affairs and the health ambassadors will be part of helping us to create or reinforce the culture of safety and caring for each other with education and then progressive discipline. I'll turn it over to Dr. Sosha to answer questions about drinking or eating or things like that in the classroom, but we're not going to be distancing or forcing any kind of breaks.
Yeah, so for the indoor classrooms, no eating and drinking, just like the other spaces. It's going to have to be the same. Here's another thing I think we ought to consider that will make the life of our contact tracing, because this is coming up. What happens if someone in the classroom is positive? I would encourage seating charts. It sounds kind of old-fashioned, but it will help a lot. Same way in the lab. If you know the perimeter of people who've been around a positive, you can then reduce the number of people that have to go into quarantine or basically quarantine because of potential exposure. Now, there is a difference for quarantining for the vaccinated and the unvaccinated community. The unvaccinated community, who are much more susceptible to acquiring infection, will be asked to quarantine for a period of time of at least a week, and they will also need to test between 3 to 5 days after exposure. For the vaccinated community, we also want them to test, but they can come onto campus and move about with masking in place because of the sufficient protection that they receive. So vaccinated individuals who are exposed can still move about wearing masks and being very careful. Be mindful of who you live with. If you live with immunocompromised individuals, be careful. We can help you there if you have questions about it. The contact tracing team will help you there. But in general, you're going to have a lot of benefit by being vaccinated so you can move around in quarantine, but we do want you to test, okay? So test, be mindful if you're around immunocompromised individuals. For the unvaccinated individuals, an exposure does mean you should go through a period of quarantine, which means you stay at home, stay in place for a period of at least a week and to test between day 3 and 5. All right, so I know that seating charts is a little bit tricky, but if you can get the students to do it in your smaller classrooms or even your larger ones, it is going to make the work of contact tracing much easier. I think we are seeing, if any of you have children that are going to school now, all of our schools are having the ripple of the fall that Chip explained. We're going to see a little bit more viral activity and more exposures and know how to handle them. And so being confined and knowing who has been exposed will be an important part of the work of the contact tracing. So we can make their life easier by some simple steps. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Dr. Sosha. The next question is for Vice Chancellor Matthews, and this pertains to airflow and filtration systems. I think you addressed this to some extent in your presentation, but specifically, have the airflow and filtration systems inside buildings been adjusted to CDC recommendations?
Yes, as I mentioned, we've changed the filtration in 95% of the buildings. The 5% of the buildings that we were unable to do have either operable windows, basically some of the older buildings, or they have window air conditioning or air conditioners. And what we've been doing is going through all of those areas, and particularly at the request of the MSO or those that are in place, to review the airflow in those areas, as well as cleaning the filters and cleaning the windows and making sure that we can identify maximum airflow. There's also an opportunity through contacting facilities management or the EOC, where someone will come out and assess the airflow to make sure that it will accommodate the number of people that you're planning to have work in the area as people return. Hopefully that answers the question. Be happy to do more in the chat.
Okay, thank you, VC Matthews. Let's. I now want to turn to ABC Jensen. So, how are decisions being made regarding course modality for fall? What can faculty do to ensure in-person instruction is minimally impacted during this return to in-person learning?
That's a great question. Since the beginning of the pandemic, our faculty have done an incredible job modifying their courses to work in an online setting. However, we're all looking forward to and perhaps a little bit nervous about returning to in-person learning and face-to-face interactions. And it's really important to recognize the impact that those in-person interactions and activities have on students and student learning. But as we prepare for that, it's important that we plan where possible for flexibility, because as we've learned repeatedly throughout this pandemic, we don't know what's coming around the curve. It's possible that we may have to pivot to online learning again at some point. And faculty have a lot of flexibility to do that. We may also have students who face challenges, everything from an exposure and a need to quarantine or isolate, or deal with life issues that pop up as a consequence of the pandemic. Let's say an elementary school or a daycare center having to send everyone home. Planning for flexibility can make all the difference here. Recording and sharing your lectures is an example that can make it possible for a student to be flexible and take care of life issues and not stress the system or potentially try to bend the rules. For instance, delaying testing when they're feeling under the weather because they fear that they're going to miss out. What we want to really do is try not to create situations where doing the right thing and keeping each other safe is pitted against things like my time to degree or my ability to graduate on time. Doing this requires extra work. It really does. But this is the nature of kind of the situation that we're operating under. An instructor may have to quarantine. An instructor may test positive. Having a contingency plan, having talked through with your department, with your colleagues, what's going to happen with your course if you test positive is a really impactful thing you can do now instead of trying to solve the situation if and when it happens. And then to answer the first part of your question, as always, decisions about adding online courses or sections, that's made at the department level. Departments and the faculty are the best position to really understand the needs of the department and the needs of the learners. And that's where we want to see decisions being made.
Thank you, Dr. Jensen. The next two questions are for Vice Chancellor Satterlund, and they pertain to the masking policy. So who will monitor and ensure compliance with the masking requirement in public spaces, such as the Price Center or the library, is the first one of them.
Thank you, Bob. So you've heard a couple of our colleagues here today speak to the really important work of the Triton Health Ambassadors. We will be hiring again about 400 Triton Health Ambassadors who are students who have training and support throughout the year to do what we call friendly compliance, recognizing healthy habits that keep Tritons safer, and also reminding students of what the expectations are. In this regard, our Triton Health Ambassadors are working with the Price Center already, as well as the library, and handing out masks and being available to ensure that students know what's expected of them. And you'll see Triton Health Ambassadors in their bright yellow shirts. Sometimes they're with another Triton Health Ambassador, and they're assigned to specific zones on campus, and they'll be ramped up and ready to support our efforts in the fall.
Thank you. The second question is of great importance to in-person instructional faculty. And that question is, what should an instructor do if a student fails to comply with the masking policy in the classroom? What resources are available to instructors to assist with this?
So first, I want to just remind everybody that to extend grace in this space. It may be that a student doesn't understand what the expectations are. They've forgotten their mask. They're hoping to just sneak in and not be seen in that regard. So we're working to make sure that there are masks available in our classrooms just for this particular circumstance. If you see a student without a mask, I would offer a mask to them. If they decline it, I would remind you that it's your classroom and you have the authority and the support to remind the student of the masking action. If you're not comfortable specifically with a direct conversation in that way, you can email studentconduct@ucsd.edu, and we'll work on the back end with you to determine the student specifically and then to work with our progressive discipline process to remedy the circumstance. We can also be available for a consultation if you would like to, if you see somebody habitually violating the policy so that they're no longer in your class.
Thank you. The next question I think could be addressed by yourself, VC Satterland, or Dr. Sosha, and Director Zumo. How will compliance with the vaccine and testing mandates be enforced? Will a faculty member know if students are in compliance with the policy? Will supervisors know if their employees are in compliance? And what tools and resources will be made available? So it's a broad question.
Dr. Sosha, do you want to just overview in general the sort of the practice and the technology, and then I can work with Director Zumo on the specific constituent groups?
Yeah, so what we've tried to do by having the employee and student health records contain information on whether you're vaccinated, as well as whether you have an approved exemption, we can then integrate your compliance with the testing requirement. Since all of our tests are recorded, the free tests and everything is being offered through UC San Diego Health, whether it's the Excite Lab or the Calm Lab, all of it gets integrated. So they have built the tools to say you are in a category of individual that has required testing for surveillance testing. Then they track intervals between your tests. And if you fall out of compliance, this is what we did for the students last year. It worked beautifully. If you fell out of compliance, the BCSA's team, their team that was managing this got notice of out of compliance students. They would then talk to them and say, what's the problem? And if there was an explanation, and then we would move to progressive discipline if they continued to be non-compliant. For the employees, what has been worked out is a process to provide a compliance dashboard, which will just indicate this individual is not compliant. It won't say why, it'll say they're non-compliant to the manager. And then you can move, the similar tool will be used on that process. For the departments, the faculty, that will fall to the department structure to follow non-compliance with testing for individuals that do not comply with the testing. We talked about masking, that's a very visible one, and that's regardless of vaccination status. So that very important step of masking is irrespective of vaccination. Under the mandate right now, the key difference is a requirement for surveillance testing, which is different for the unvaccinated community. So hopefully that explains how we built a system of tracking it and identifying the individuals out of compliance. Then the individuals who need to know are notified in a way that they can then make steps and interventions.
And then Bob, towards Dr. Sosha's point, we're applying the same infrastructure that we use for testing compliance to vaccine mandate compliance. The distinction here, as Dr. Sosha mentioned, that I just want to reiterate, is a faculty person or a professional staff member that works with a student will only be made aware of compliance, not vaccination status, because that's HIPAA protected, and we'll be working specifically around issues where there's not compliance, and my office will be managing non-compliance in the locations where people are impacted.
Thank you, Dr. Satterland. Okay, I think we will move on to a question for ABC Jensen. So lecturing and leading a class while wearing a mask may be challenging from a communication perspective. Do you have any guidance or tools available for instructors to help mitigate this? Have there been any IT upgrades to the classrooms?
Thank you. Yes. So starting with the last part of the question first, there have been quite extensive upgrades to the classrooms. We have updated Zoom capabilities, the microphones, the cameras, and the regular IT in the classrooms to better support either teaching to a remote audience or a hybrid audience. And ETS has always have updated their website to provide information about that, and are more than happy to help walk the faculty through the technology in the new classrooms. Teaching with a mask does sound very difficult. I had the opportunity to talk to a number of faculty who did teach with masking over the course of the past year. And it does take a little bit of getting used to. But most of them felt that they got used to it fairly quickly, and it really wasn't a hurdle. What we strongly recommend is looking at using microphones and amplification so that you don't have to try to project as hard. But as we've gotten used to so many things throughout this pandemic, it's something you get used to. You find it weird the first time or two, and then after it just becomes second nature.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Jensen. The next question is for Vice Chancellor Brown. Is there updated guidance with regard to human subjects research? What can and cannot be done with human subjects, such as the amount of time up close and so forth?
Well, again, I just want to remind people to think about a research context just like any other context on campus, an instructional context, a context where you're working with staff. So we think about the research context as having both the researchers and their staff and the participants in the research. And for the staff, the guidelines are exactly the same as they are for the rest of campus. People have to be masked if they're indoors. We encourage social distancing. People need to be vaccinated. The faculty, staff, and students that are working in research labs need to be vaccinated. Exactly the same standards. If there are human subjects that are involved, then if it's in a clinical setting, those subjects would need to adhere to the health sciences requirements. If it's in a non-clinical setting, and there's less immediate interaction with the participant, they adhere again to all the standards that are in that we have across campus. We do have some special guidelines for areas like the performing arts, for musicians, for dancers, for singers, and those are listed on the Research Ramp Up Guidelines website and in the IRB website. Yes, the IRB website as well. So that there are some physical distancing standards that are applied to those specific types of settings. But beyond that, the easy way to think about this is that the standards are the standards, regardless of the context that you're in here on campus.
Thank you. Thank you, VC Brown. The next question is for EVC Simmons. Given the evolution of the pandemic, it's something on a lot of people's minds. What would trigger a change in the university or research COVID management policy, such as reverting back to fully remote instruction? Should faculty be planning to pivot to hybrid or remote instruction just in case?
Yes, I'm sure that is on everybody's minds. So to start with the first part of the question, we have our COVID monitoring team of health experts and student affairs experts and communications experts monitoring all of the data every single day, the data from campus, for testing, wastewater, cases, everything, and also monitoring all of the data from the county and the region and keeping track of what's going on nationally. So every day they're watching the data to see if there are any sudden shifts, any upturns, any spikes, and to see what's going on in the community as well, which of course connects to us. And they're staying very closely aware of the public health guidance from the county and from the state and the CDC. So if they saw a sudden shift in the data and or the public health guidance that we were being given by the government changed, they would immediately notify me. I would convene the COVID response team, and that team would come up with a recommendation for the chancellor that would be vetted by the cabinet and then decided upon by the chancellor. So we can have a very quick turnaround if a pivot is ever needed. So it would be some big shift in the data. There's not one particular number I can point to because there's so many numbers that you have to watch, but the shifts in the numbers and the public health guidance we're very attentive to. So Should faculty be planning to pivot to remote instruction suddenly if they need to? Yes, we should all have this in the back of our mind that things suddenly could shift to where our county public health department is telling everybody that they should not be going to work in person. And if that happened, we all know how to deal with it because we dealt with that at the very start of the pandemic. And you all did a magnificent job on zero notice with zero experience in shifting immediately to remote. And the research went remote and everything went remote. Now that we've had almost 18 months of experience, I'm confident that if we absolutely had to, we could do it again, and we would. So sure, have plans in the back of your mind. We all need to. But in the meantime, let's enjoy our ability to work together in person with the vaccination and the masking and the ventilation supporting us.
Thank you for that, EVC Simmons. So I'm afraid that is all the time we have for today. Thank you for everyone for your questions. We'll do our best to answer the questions by updating the FAQ, questions that weren't answered, by updating the FAQ that is on the Return to Learn website and posting a recording of this town hall as well. I'd like to thank the presenters and the guests for sharing their time and information with us today. And I thank you, the faculty and researchers of UC San Diego, for attending today, working together as a community to help us bring us through these unprecedented times. We had more than 650 attendees today, and these town halls are an important part of how we stay united as a community. To help improve them, we encourage you to complete the post-event survey that you will be sent shortly to help us continue to refine our communications during this stressful period. The next Return to Learn halls for staff will be August 31, and September town halls will be scheduled soon. These will be posted on the Return to Learn website for registration. This concludes the Return to Learn Faculty and Research Town Hall for today. Thank you, take care, stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you all on campus again soon.